remember that song with the video clip of Christopher Walken dancing on and around an escalator like a boss? Well, this is the movie that was probably made around the same time that was created, since the same escalator and the same Walken with the same suit appears in this flick. That little tidbit aside, New Rose Hotel is a science fiction on a budget. It is even a cyberpunk movie about some people from a major corporation who decide to concoct a plan to sabotage another major corporation by making it that its CEO falls in love with the escort girl and singer. What is weird about this movie is that despite not looking like a cyberpunk film, it doesn't have special effects. It doesn't have futuristic cars or buildings or clothing. It doesn't look like Blade Runner or others at all. It feels exactly like a cyberpunk film. I can't really explain why, because even though there are some very minor gadgets, the whole movie is about a plan to perform corporate espionage. The acting is fine, though not Defoe's best. Walken of course is just Walken, so you know what to expect there. And the women is easy on the eyes, but nothing special for the rest. The ending of the movie I found a little too confusing. Enough so that I had to rewind a couple of times just to make sure that I missed something. But after googling the wiki, it was a lot more clear. This isn't a perfect film, by far, but I suggest giving it a look regardless. Could use a remake with special effects in my opinion, but they probably just fuck it up anyways. Check that. Nightmare Alley is a 2021 remake of a movie with the same name from 1947 about a man, this time played by Bradley Cooper, who cons his way into the life of a circus artist, fleeing from a dark secret from his past. Arriving at the carnival, he quickly worms himself into the tight-knit family to get what he wants, goes on from there, and eventually has karma served to him. Nightmare Alley is a beautifully shot film about a man, his ambitions, and the ultimate downfall and punishment for his hubris. The hand of Guillermo del Toro is clear, and it feels so much like the old HBO series Carnival that I got sad remembering that too quickly cancelled gem. Nightmare Alley is a long movie, but thankfully it keeps you interested during the whole play. There's a lot of big names in this movie. It almost feels like a circle jerk. It's void of any modern commentary and politics and is just, quite frankly, a good damn movie. It was so good I decided to watch the original and see if that is even better. I heard it's a bit different, which doesn't surprise me, but I'm intrigued. Also, bring back Carnival the way it was back then and give it the 5 seasons it deserved. Smash that. On January 17, 1950, a bunch of hoodlums performed the heist of the century by breaking into the offices of Brink's company in Boston and getting out of there with a score of several millions. The Brink's job is the fictional retelling of this heist, putting Peter Columbo Falk into the skin of the one who had the whole idea to do this. Like any good heist movie, we get presented with a little who's who as the team is formed. We go through the motions, the tryouts, the plan, and eventually the actual heist. Whether and how things go wrong, like in many heist movies, I'll leave for you to experience for yourself, but it's good to know that these robbers eventually did get caught somehow. The Brink's job is part comedy, part crime flick, and it's an enjoyable couple of hours that will entertain you on multiple levels. The fact this is based on a real-life event makes it even more interesting, especially since you can see how a heist like this could happen in the first place. And to realize it didn't happen before that moment is even more baffling. Oh, and this is a William Friedkin film who, as you know, is one of the directors I enjoy any movies from, and this is yet another to put on that list. Smash that. Domino, played by a young and very hot Keira Knightley, is a bad girl in all aspects. She's a sexy tomboy who isn't like all girls, and she kicks some serious ass. And that was quite fun to see and had me swoon a little bit for her. Unfortunately, the movie becomes a style over substance flick very quickly, with snap cuts, artsy coloring flashes, and weird narrative echoes cause that's cool. Somewhere in this is an interesting movie about a girl who wants to become a bounty hunter but pretty much forces 2 con men to become the thing they pretend to be. But then suddenly we get a reality TV element thrown in and, even more surprising, two cast members of the famous 90s series 90210. Imagine Tarantino taking speed after being hit in the head with a very large fish. It's a movie that's too try-hard in its attempts to be cool and edgy, but even with that is boring as fuck. Ear is easy on the eyes, but even her look turns stale after a while. Mickey Rourke's presence is just as you would expect. I simply cannot recommend this. Sad really, but it is what it is. Check that. The Pizzagate Massacre is an interesting title, instantly reminding you of the glorious conspiracy theory of a certain female Clinton using restaurants for some human trafficking and other vile things with children. Unfortunately, its alternate title, Duncan, a fake news film, is much more adept at portraying what the movie is all about. In Duncan we follow a black amateur journalist, and yes, mentioning that is important, who gets intrigued by a white alt-right militiaman who is going after the lizard people that are doing all these evil deeds. We delve into the violent world of this man in a more comedic manner and are of course educated on how alt-right and racist he is, because that's kinda what this movie is about. Not in an obvious manner, but it's clear that it sides with the black journalist. This is a low-budget indie movie, but it's one of those that is actually well made, with above mediocre acting and better cinematography than you would expect. Unfortunately, I would have preferred to have seen some kind of They Live rip-off where a man, alt-right or not, actually uncovers a lizard conspiracy and does something about it with a reluctant female. They Live, X-Files with violence and all that nifty stuff. But we got Duncan instead. It's okay, but it's not what its original title claims it is, and that's unfortunate. Check that. The King's Man is the third installment in the Kingsman franchise, a modern and slightly different spy movie akin to earlier James Bond movies about an organization utilizing maids and butlers for their information gathering. And this movie, The King's Man, shows us how it all started. We are whisked back to the beginning of the 20th century where British colonization hits some snags, and then too close to 1914 where dark mysterious forces, consisting of Rasputin, Lenin, some other peeps and one man whose face is constantly hidden with an accent cause we need a mystery, conspire to start a world war. Needless to say they succeed and we go through that and past. And all this is done in a cool way, with cool moves, cool shots, cool people being cool. It's all very cool. Well, it's supposed to be cool, and apparently they wanted it to be epic too cause there's a musical score over every single fucking scene. It pauses for a minute and then, for example, someone walks or talks and this pseudo-epic song pops up. It's so constant it grated my nerves. I mean, it's constant, it's annoying, and it's the opposite of fucking cool. I understand why they did that. It's like a laugh track you remove from a comedy show which then falls flat on its face. Style over substance once again. Sad really, because there's something in here. I'm looking forward to the next one though, because that very expected cameo at the end opens up some opportunities. Check that. In the Unholy with the ever-cool Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who seems to be Jeffrey Dean Morgan in every movie and series he plays and acts like he's a disgraced smut journalist for a gossip and paranormal paper. While on assignment for a fake story about cow mutilation, he discovers a story that's much more interesting and real to sell for mucho dinero. A local deaf and dumb girl miraculously heals and becomes the vessel of the Holy Mother Maria, performing miracles and catching the attention of international media ready to baptize the small town into a new place of pilgrimage. Things are not as they seem though, and something very sinister is discovered. The Unholy is a boring slog of a horror movie with a few lame jump scares and nothing much else. Morgan's acting is like watching the cuck version of Negan walk around and do things. His blank stare made me think he knew how much the movie would suck, regardless of the Twitter posts he made about how good it is. I wanted to like the movie, but it's simply not satanic enough to be interesting. The story is basic, the acting subpar, special effects awful, and what's worse, the antagonist is just lame. And that, for a horror movie, is almost as crucial as the way you scare your audience, which doesn't happen either. A shame, or should I say, and an unholy mess. Drop that. Deep Rising is a very 90s horror action movie with the then very popular Dutch bombshell Famke Janssen, who plays a thief on board of $1 million Titanic-like yacht, crossed with that another character is on a different boat with some very unsavory types and one very annoying weird nut job character you wish would die sooner rather than later. Spoiler: he doesn't. As the crew of the small ship boards the big one, they discover it empty and abandoned, and bloody as weird sounds emanate through the ducts. Deep Rising is a weird mix between Titanic and Aliens. So close to Aliens you can pretty much say this is a rip-off, but it's a good rip-off. Being the 90s, however, everything looks corny and cheesy. Something very weird about how the 90s looked. Famke and the other characters feel out of place, and the CGI is a little bit better than you would expect, but still pretty noticeable. It's not nail-biting like the Aliens movie, but it's fun and exciting enough to be enjoyable. Except that one character who is the prototype of most comic relief characters in the 90s. And that one Jar Jar character some dweeb decided to use not long after in his space epic. Deep Rising is an okay popcorn movie from an era that, like Vanilla Ice mentioned, still had a specific vibe. What made this movie for me, however, was the ending, and I wished they made a sequel of it somehow. Alas, Deep Rising was a one-time thing, and maybe that was for the best. Check that. Under Gods is dark dystopian science fiction from Belgium that weaves a couple of short stories together to bring you an interesting, thought-provoking but fairly depressing look into a future. All the stories seem to have a certain subject matter. I'll leave for you to discover yourself, combining them into the main story, allowing for some societal critique. I saw one review by some doofus claiming this was all about the evils of patriarchy, but you can discard that guy, cause that's only a very short-sighted and limited look on what it is. Also, this dickhead is American, and seeing this as a European movie, that stuff really isn't that prevalent here, at least not yet. Under Gods is an artistic view of the future, reminiscent of 1984 and the original Fahrenheit 451. It's good, not great, but good enough to create another movie set in this world that doesn't use the concept of an anthology to tell its stories. Check that. An unhappy couple is involved in an accident after a serious fight. The husband takes advantage of this to get rid of his wife once after all. Unfortunately for him, he is seen by another driver he had an altercation with earlier. What ensues is a cat and mouse game between the two men, who eventually end up dragging an innocent couple into their madness. Suffice to say, shit will hit the fan. Sudden Fury is a simple but effective thriller that incorporates relationships and rage into something quite special. The only downside this movie has is that it might be a little bit too simple. You pretty much know where everything is going from the start. There are no real surprises except for one sudden occurrence that in retrospect still was quite predictable. Just the moment was effectively startling. What surprised me more, however, was the ending. However infuriating it kinda was. Watch this, and never get into a road rage, fellas. Smash that.